Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. I am a psychic in New York, and what you have reached is Venus Unplugged. Started a little early today because there's so much to do, and I thought I'll get a little jump start on the day and the week, which we all kind of need a little extra time, considering the last few weeks since time has kind of melted and warped, and it feels like the image of Salvador Dali of the time dripping. So what we're doing here now, and what we do at Venus Unplugged, we talk about and explore the archetypes, particularly the archetype of Venus and Eros, which are the principles of love, not necessarily personal love. That is an aspect of the Venusian energy, but it's beauty and it's love, and there's sometimes this planet just crucifies Venus because she doesn't really give a shit. She can go into complete and utter abandon, and it's pretty hard to shame Venus, which, can't control somebody if you can't shame them. So what we're looking at, what we have been looking at over the last 18 weeks, is the major arcana in the Tarot. And it's not necessarily for divinity or for divining. What we are looking at is to use the Tarot as a talisman, something that protects us, something that informs us. We can use any of the major arcana for meditation, as a reminder of what we may need. All right, let's say if you want a relationship in your life, so you're going to study that particular card, the symbolism of that card, and what keeps you focused, focal points. So this week is Judgment, number 20. So Judgment is about, it's near the end of the transformational process. So in many of the cards, there's this huge, Tarot cards, they have different images. The same symbolism, but they get to the symbol in a different image. And so there's a huge angel, it's Gabriel blowing its horn, and most people have a negative response to that it's Judgment Day, and people are going to be burnt and go to hell. And, well, I'm sure there's a hell. I'm not sure that anybody's in it. So that's how we look at that. We always have to look at closely and learn to use a critical mind, but an open heart to interpretations of divinity, consciousness, spirituality. It's all man-made. And yes, there are many experiences where humanity is exposed to the divine laws, and the wisdom of the elders is very important. But the bottom line is your relationship with it. That's why we study, and we explore, and we learn, in some ways, critical thinking, where we, it's not just what we want it to be. We're not just ruled by the emotions and, well, I feel this, therefore it is true. In your world, yeah. In your perception, absolutely. But that doesn't mean it's a universal truth. And so Judgment is also learning to discern the combination of the facts. How is this place in reality? And how are you experiencing reality? So with this particular image, it's a stage, because what Jung felt about the Tarot, Carl Jung, was that these were stages of the individuation process. And the individuation process is the thing that makes us truly whole, according to the divine plan for you, uniquely you, which is a lifetime process. And that's part of the journey towards wholeness. Not what you were taught, not what you were manipulated into. What do you really, really feel is going on? And of course, the greatest part of the individuation process is stepping away from they and them and those others, out there, and what they did to you or to me, or yes, it's true. People can do some horrible, horrible things to one another. But if you stay stuck in that one, some things we have to just let go of. You're not going to get any resolution. You're not going to really feel like forgiving, or you won't be forgiven, but you need to look at it, explore it, understand that that's part of the human journey. Not favoring light over dark or vice versa. It's that balance. And so judgment or resurrection, that this is the card that has us recognize that we're in a new place and that our consciousness has been dissolved. What we knew as consciousness, our beliefs. There's an old saying, what we loved in our 20s, we don't love. What we love in our teens, we don't love in our 20s. And that goes on and on. So if we're at this place of this card or judgment, or we're exploring this card, or we have no idea what the heck does that mean, or we have a ill-conceived idea, like, oh my God, that's Judgment Day and we're all going to die and go to hell. Yeah, that's not critical thinking, that's for sure. We need to be able to look at that and say, what does that really, really mean? Is that literal? Which is a lot of literal interpretations, which can be very dangerous to heart and soul. And it also is kind of a tax shelter for people's shadow and stupidity. So this image, this judgment, it's a form of the final stage. Now, there's never really a final stage, because if we get to the highest point of the level that we're at, and we become whatever we'd like to name it, enlightened, the next morning we're back up in the beginning of another cycle. My spiritual teacher was always about cycles within cycles, and I figured, dang, how many cycles are there? And then you find out there's a lot of cycles. So what we recognize here is that we're at the level, and we're about to reach the highest possible we can go in this cycle, or this level of understanding, or this point in our life. You're at the final stage of knowledge, if you have known it, and you're about to be, in a sense, resurrected into a new thinking. It's always disorientating. It just takes us time. Even the most delightful, wonderful, marvelous events that can come into our life can be traumatizing. Good can be traumatizing. It's like, wow, I thought the world sucked, and now this amazing thing happened, and now I've got to change everything. Falling in love, traumatizing. The ego's completely, and falling in love is the last thing the ego wants. Because in the fall, which is why we call it a fall, not an upsweep, the ego has no play. And then when the ego gets a hold of this falling in love, it usually destroys it and says, no, this isn't right, or, really wrecks it for us. So we're not against the ego. We need the ego. We love the ego. But in these states of shifts and changes, the ego has to step aside. And certainly in the second adulthood, the ego is not to rule our life. The soul is. The ego is good for the outer world, getting things done and getting married and raising kids and doing all that kind of marvelous stuff in our profession. In the second adulthood, it really is the soul that begins to take over, and the longing. And very often the longing for the things we couldn't get to because we were busy being dictated by the ego. So this is a resurrection into a new way of thinking, and it's a place when you're entering a new eon or a cycle, which is in the grand scheme of life and eternity. We'll all be somewhere between here and eternity. So we try to let this happen naturally and beautifully. Each day I try to do, and I succeed, in at least one kind act and one beautiful act. Just one. It could be a prayer, it could be an action, it could be a thought, whatever. But, find what you value and give it to yourself. So even an act of kindness towards another is also an act of kindness towards yourself. And I feel kindness reminds people that there's good in the world and there's love in the world. Even a little itsy-bitsy is better than nothing. You help them to remember. And with beauty, it can be beauty you give to yourself. It can be dressing beautifully for the day. Notice when you go that little extra mile and then you get all sorts of compliments. Like, wow, I really love that color on you, yada, yada, yada. Now, some days we can't take that. Some days we want to be incognito. We don't want anybody to notice us, or we're very introverted. So when we're in an introverted state of mind, it's like we don't want to be noticed. We want to slide out the back because that's the need for the day. But or seeing the beauty that you never saw before. So, or the beauty of the flame of life. So this flame, or these flames of the judgment, it's a spiritual rebirth, and it's the recognition of the outer life and the inner life as the one life and the unity of all things. And as this primal life force has been called a God or spiritual resurrection in the path of return to the perfect union within oneself. It's when we transcend dualism, it's either black or white, it's left, right, it's above or below. We can stand in what's called the tension of the opposite and know that both are true and be absolutely comfortable with that and know that it's not a contradiction. That is a truism. Then we're in that state of the discernment or judgment card, where we are allowing life to be, our life to be, exactly what it is. And there's a great beauty in that. There's this sweet little Sufi teaching, and which I'm just going to paraphrase, but it's about it's the story of the saints and the sinners, and it's the tales in a book called The Wisdom of Idiots, and he talks about that once upon a time there lived a dervish devotee who felt he should monitor the behavior of others for godliness. So one day he discovered that a man who was gambling excessively, and the dervish took it upon himself to help curb the man's behavior. And he stayed outside the man's house And each time the man left to gamble, which was every single time, the dervish placed a stone upon a pile. And the growing pile of stones was a visible reminder of evil. And for 20 years, this continued. And every day the gambler saw the devotee, and he said to himself, how that saintly man works for my redemption. And then it came to pass that both men died on the same day, and at the same time, and as a result of a natural catastrophe. And then an angel came to take the soul of the gambler to paradise. And the gambler said, whoa, yo, what? No. How could that be? I'm a sinner. I must go to hell. Surely you're looking for the devotee who sat opposite my house and who has tried to reform me for 2 decades. The devotee, said the angel? No. He's being taken to lower regions since he has to be roasted on a spit. Serious angel, right? What justice is this? Says the gambler, forgetting his situation. You must have gotten the instructions reversed, which is kind of hilarious because there is a book. Well, I'm not going off about angels getting their instructions reversed. And the angel says, no, not so. And I shall explain. It is thus wise. The devotee has been indulging himself for 20 years with feelings of superiority and merit. Now it is his time that the pile is for himself, not for you. And what about my reward? What have I earned? Asked the gambler. You are to be rewarded because every time you pass the dervish, you thought first of goodness and secondary of the dervish. It is goodness, not man, which is rewarding you for your fidelity. Pretty powerful stuff. And that's the judgment card. Not our spiritual superiority, but seeing the goodness, no matter how small and no matter how little. There's got to be a pony in this horse shit, like the joke goes. So that's part of what. So when you need that, when you're struggling to discern what is really going on, what is the judgment, and you find yourself, saying one of those little quips, and well, what goes around comes around. It's like, oh, come on, really? You think that's it? That's the whole? You can, or anyone can just say that little. It's nice to have that as a little reminder, but that's not the whole of life. I remember one time, because these insights, they take your breath away and they come out of nowhere. It's just, so I was busy doing something, and I don't know if I was making something. I don't remember. I was in the chores of everyday life, right? And suddenly, unbeknownst to myself, because the most conscious person in the world is still only 5% conscious, because the unconscious is way bigger. So obviously, my unconscious was working this out, and I had this startling insight that it was a relationship of many years ago, and I thought I loved, and then suddenly, out of psyche, she says, and I realized the truth of it. I could not tolerate our differences. I would not accept or tolerate the differences as human beings. Well, needless to say, eating shitball soup is not fun. But the revelation threw me, but it also freed me. Like, wow. So here you thought, oh, my love was the greatest love, and only to realize, no, I had too much judgment. I had a better version of him, and I wanted that version, not who he actually was. So that's part of judgment too, when we realize, whoa, look at that, really, really opened my eyes to so much more. So then I'm like, whoa, where else are you doing this? Because that's what it's about, not punishing yourself, but having the, hopefully, maturity and with a little dose of wisdom to look and go like, that is really true. I thought I was just the bee's knees, and I understood. And he was the betrayer of the principles. No, he loved me a hell of a lot more than I loved him. And so, when we have these realizations, we mourn, but what we're mourning is our cherished ignorance, our misbeliefs. That's what we mourn. We've got to give them up. It doesn't work. So it's kind of a resurrection. And once I had that thought, once we ever have a thought that has a deep truth, a deep knowing, we can never return back to that old way of being. Not even visitation rights. You never return to who or what you were before. Your life is forever changed. And then when insights come like that, there's this other strange kind of unknown knowing, or that you're in the presence of something you don't know, but you stay there in the not knowing. Very hard to do for the ego, because the ego wants to know, well, what time, and how long are we going to be there, and how much is it going to be, and all this quantitative stuff. And in the unknowing space, it's a completely different area code. It's the one that is connected to the eternal and the universal, and has you part of the Creator. And then, as your thoughts change, you radiate. It's a different energy field. So, in this card, the angel Gabriel blows his horn, calls from on high. His trumpet sends out the call. He's calling for the rising of your soul. And through the deep love for each other, in many of these tarot cards, I don't think they have it in the Aquarian deck, but there's the image of an angel, and then the two lovers, and somebody waking up from a grave, and so these are all very, very important symbols of the rising consciousness. And this signifies the end of duality and the end of polarizing. So it's like the collective soul of the lovers. They become one when they rise up from the darkness or dense vibrations on the physical plane, and the vibratory levels represent kind of a rainbow, moving through the rainbow in the colors of the path of return. So when we're working with this card, we're told to surrender. And in that surrender, where we are risen. So our spirit rises in balance and harmony, to a plane of consciousness with the divine. So when we're feeling that we need that, it's like, man, I gotta get away from my stuff. Use this card of judgment. So because it dramatizes, the spiritual resurrection in so many different ways. So the figures that are in this card, they represent, of course, all aspects of you. And the energy and the vitality when we are risen, it's like get your sparkle on, man. Just get your sparkle on. Decide that. Feel that sparkle. It's there. And when we're not judging in the ego sense, but we're truly seeing and experiencing in the divine sense, we're never alone. We're never alone. We are never without. We are just one big old universe, all aligned in this cosmic harmony. Twice in my life, apropos of absolutely nothing, I was just going about my daily day, and suddenly I heard the music of the spheres, which is one of the most extraordinary experiences ever, where you hear it's like the stars singing to one another, or the chorus of souls, and it's a harmony and beauty. And so, put your ear down for the music of the spheres. Be able to see that the judgment is not about, it's about discerning, not about literally judging. And this is the card that's going to bring you to a totally heightened sense of your reality. And we can experience it initially as a great catastrophe, like, holy moly, these are my cherished petty beliefs. Nah, you don't need them. So may this week be filled with the pure joy of your being. And share it. And live the beauty. Live that Aphrodite. Live that. And that's not necessarily sexuality. It's just the beauty of the feminine in men and in women. See it. The real beauty. And give it to yourself. Because so often people will feel like, oh no, I can't have that. That's too beautiful. It's like, really? Oh, it heals. Beauty heals. Vanity destroys, but beauty doesn't. Beauty heals us. So we observe the beauty in nature. We observe the beauty in ourselves. We observe the beauty in children. Just stop. It's all around. And if for some reason you're in a situation when there's no beauty, make it up in your head and listen to that. Or open up an art book or anything that brings you in union, in relationship to that Venusian energy, that archetypal Venus will pay off. Not the love that we think we should have, but the love that really is there. That's the changing. That's the game changer. So, till next week, and we'll finish up next week with the World card. And have a glorious week. Bye-bye.
Napa know-how. The Napa guy knows not to judge a man by his car's multicolored paint job or absence of modern gadgetry. Who cares if it's technically old enough to vote and the windows are powered by the strength of your left arm? Your monthly payment is zero, and it'll stay that way. Because with over 500,000 parts and a little Napa know-how, you can keep anything on the road. She may not be pretty, but she's all yours. That's Napa know-how. Napa know-how.